So good evening to one and all who are present here. So I'm going to be giving myself and Yuvraj are going to be giving a talk on gravitational waves. So what is a gravitational wave? So gravitational wave in a nutshell is just basically the ripples that are caused in the space time by an accelerated body having gravity of its own. So what we can it was also discovered or predicted using Einstein's field equations in Einstein's theory of general relativity, and to be understood more easily, we can consider an example such like take a piece of cloth, and then like try to stretch it at four different directions at the four corners of the cloth, a rectangular cloth, and then place a ball of certain mass m in the center of the cloth. So we see that there is a dent formed at the center where the ball is kept. So this is nothing but a dent. This is analogous to the dent that is caused by a presence of a body in space time continuum. So space time continuum is analogous to the cloth that is present, and a body like a space heavenly body or a space object or a planet or a star is analogous to the ball that is being kept on in the center of the cloth. So the dent is due to its mass and its gravity. So is what Einstein had described in his general theory of relativity, that gravitation is due to the dent in the space-time continuum due to a body of mass m that is present on it. So gravity, that this is the basic understanding of how gravity plays in this part. So gravitational waves, on another hand, is nothing but the when the body that is being kept at the center, it starts to accelerate or it starts to move. We observe some sort of ripples that is present in the same space time. So basic to understand, when you put a stone, when you like place a stone on water, like so perfect, like without any movement, you see that it just causes a little bit of depression in the water, but it doesn't cause much ripples. So when you start to when you like throw the stone from a certain height, it has some energy, right? So the energy is being dissipated in the water in the form of ripples. So in the same case, we need a body that is accelerating also to produce the gravitational waves. And as we know that in this case, so but as we know that gravity is weak for one of the is the weakest of the fundamental forces. So we need a body or a set of bodies of considerable mass, like we need a great amount of mass to be able to observe gravitational waves coming from the set of bodies. So one great example of a source of gravitational waves that we can observe today is nothing but is nothing but from a binary star system. So in the same example that we use of the cloth, now place two balls that starts to revolve around each other, that starts to rotate. So now we can observe that there are much more interesting ripples that arise from due to this action. So in the similar case, we can observe that a body to or a set of bodies of considerable mass, of a system of set of bodies of considerable mass, which is accelerating in the space time, produces gravitational waves. So this is the basic understanding of how it's produced. And one example of a source of gravitational wave is the binary star system. And another, obviously we know that if you want mass and if you want a huge deal of gravity present alongside it, it's obviously a black hole. So a black hole, as we know, is present in the center of every galaxy. So this is also one of the major sources of gravitational waves that is being produced in or being observed in the current day. So coming to the detection part of the gravitational waves. So how do we know that these exist? Uh, Hello, is there a problem, or something? Guys? Oh, okay, no, like somebody turn on the mic and said something. Okay, so to detect these waves, we need a special method to do so. So one of the methods includes interferometry. So some of us may have come across interferometry in the Michelson-Morley ether detection experiment. So it was done with the help of an interferometer based to detect the ether, the so-called ether that is being present in the this thing. So that makes the speed of light constant. So this is this interferometry is also used to detect the gravitational waves. So this interferometer is interferometer is like it's a sample model of how a basic interferometer looks. So it's nothing but a light source is being a coherent light source is being present, and then it emits the laser. We typically use laser to make the minute measurements. So it, okay, so the laser is being like made to go incident to a half silver mirror. The mirror reflects some of it, and then it tries to like send the other but the reflective mirror, and then the two coincident waves try to like collide with like interfere in like be made to be made to like collide with each other, and it forms an interference pattern. With the interference pattern, we can then detect, like we can understand the nature of the body slash the distance of the body. So in this way we can say interferometer is helpful in detection of the gravitational waves. So basically based on the principle of superimposition of waves, constructive and destructive interference. So now let's look at the interferometry in the detection of gravitational waves. So in a sample model, we take two test masses that are set at a large distance, and larger the distance, the more minute measurements can be made in the given distance. So we need to keep those two test masses as far away from each other to be able to get accurate and more amount of measurements between in the length of those in the distance. So then the masses are then like they are protected or slash prevented to interact from any other like source of energy slash interference other than gravity. Obviously like gravity we cannot shield it as such. So then the lasers are then in the previous experiment and the previous image we've seen how the interferometer works. So in the same case we keep two objects at the both ends, and then we try to send out a laser. So the laser keeps bouncing between these two bars, and then what happens here is that the masses are free to move under gravity. So when there is a gravitational wave sent out, the masses interact with the gravitational wave and they sort of move, or you can say a wobble is being like detected. So when a laser is sent and it keeps bouncing like as such, but then when a gravitational wave passes by, it stretches the space-time continuum. So what happens is that there's a anomaly in the movement of the body, and then that anomaly can be detected in the interference pattern that is being caused in this case. So the gravitational wave can be detected in such method. And this is the kind of principle that was kept the principle of a model that was kept in order to detect the gravitational waves. So what happens here is that the LIGO, that is the LIGO laser interferometry gravitational wave observation. So they were the ones who discovered and found the actual proof that gravitational waves exist in an experiment that was conducted in 2015. So there were their arms which you can see here and here, their arms were 4 kilometers wide. So this is the largest interferometer that humanity's ever seen, like till now. So the arms are 4 kilometers wide, and then and then in this case, what happens is that the gravitational force, as I said, is like a very weak force. So as if we notice that where the ripples after that, like say the water ripple example, so the ripples are more strong near to the source, but then they fade away as they get away from the source of the ripple. So what we so like consider in this scale, we are considering in a cosmic scale. So we consider the gravitational wave that is being produced by a binary star system or a neutron star. So by the time it reaches Earth, it, its energy is very little, and then it is said that the wave is the calculations for detecting the wave has to be made that is like 10,000 times smaller than a proton. So it's a very minute measurement, but that has to be done. So by the calculation engineer, the engineers obviously they were calculating the distance that has to be the distance of the arms that have to be set to make such a minute calculation, and they found out that they needed like 1,200 kilometers has to be the size, the distance between the two arms. So practically this is impossible. So this method was again tackled by, this paradox was actually tackled by the Fabry-Perot cavities. So the Fabry-Perot cavity is actually one of the widely used methods in interferometry. What it says here is that the light, the laser which is being incident, it goes to the beam splitter, and then one of it there are two mirrors that are kept at each end of the arms, so each of the arms from the beam splitter. So what happens is that when the laser from the beam splitter goes to the mirror, these mirrors, so they are kind of a reflective mirror. So what happens is that when these the laser, they bounce back continuously 300 times and go along with the incident source, and then they go and are made to interfere with each other. So to be specific, like when the beam splitter sends out the incident ray, the mirror, it sends out to the interference mirror, and then these laser are made to bounce like 300 times in this 4 kilometer gap that is being there between the arms. So the laser actually travels 3 into 400, that is 1,200 kilometers, but only at the 4 kilometer distance of these arms. So in this way, the problem of the distance is solved, and that we can make more precise measurements in this case. And one of the and then some of the advantages of using this method is, since the collision since the laser waves are made to bounce back 300 times along with the incoming source, it is more sensitive to the changes that are made, that is present between this two between in the scale. And the second one is that it also covers a distance of 1,200 meters by just keeping a 4 kilometer gap between the arms. So it is practically also now more possible and also meets the theoretical needs. So in this case, we can solve the distance problem by using the Fabry-Perot cavity system. And but now we've solved the distance problem, but there's another problem here. One more problem is that the power of the laser. So the power of the laser that is being sent, like the input power of the laser, is actually 75 watts, 40 watts laser. So but then the power that is required to make such a measurement of the gravitational wave, it has to be 750 kilowatts. So that's a huge difference in the amount of energies, but this is also solved with the additional equipment that's required here, is called a power recycling mirror, or they are called as PRMs in short. So the PRMs have a reflective side and a like a what's it they have a reflecting side as well as the transparent side. So here the laser is being sent to the power recycling mirror that is present, actually it's actually present in both of the arms. So the power recycling mirror is sent, and then what it does is that the reflection goes to the beam splitter, and then it goes up to these mirrors, and then it comes back to the power recycling mirror. But when it comes back to the power recycling mirror, by making such fine quantum mechanical as well as many engineering methods, it is said that the reflected ray always falls in the reflecting side of the recycling mirror and not the transparent side. So by making these adjustments to the mirror, it is made such a way that the incident ray is made to pass through the transparent layer to the beam splitter. But then when it comes back to the power recycling mirror, it is made to only pass through the reflective side of the power recycling mirror. So in this case, what happens is when it comes back in this, when it comes back, the power, it is made to go to the output, the detector, the photo detector. It actually it actually passes through the power recycling mirror a couple of times along with the incident ray, and in this case, the power is like multiplied by so many times. So this is one of the another power solution that is being used in order to get precise measurements. So obviously we know that more the power of the laser, the more resolving power of the device. So here we can get like the perfect and like perfect and precise measurements of the fringe bands, and then we can detect the gravitational waves more accurately. So this is more detailed in about how we detect the gravitational waves and what are the modifications that we have done in order to make a device that is theoretically also acceptable and practically also possible. So this was the kind of equipment that was used by LIGO to detect the gravitational waves. So this is also another prototype, an image of a prototype of LISA. So it's actually laser interferometry space astronomy, and then this is actually a type of a space shuttle which is also a gravitational wave detector. So this space probe is actually launched into the space, and it keeps collecting all the information about where all the gravitational waves are being produced and detected. It is actually set to launch in 2037, if I'm not wrong. So this is the kind of the progress that we're expecting in the next couple of decades in order to detect the gravitational waves more accurately and more widely. And now let's come to the part where why do we need to require, like why do we need to understand the gravitational waves, like what is the use. So as we know that gravitational waves can transfer without any medium. I mean, it doesn't need a medium to like propagate, and it cannot be obstructed by anything else other than gravity itself. So what we can know here is that we can, with the help of the calculations that we make by observing the gravitational waves of a body, we can take an example of a black hole. So with the accurate measurements that are made with respect to it, can also tell us what is at the center of a black hole. So with more intense measurements that are being made from it, and we can also learn what happened the next second of Big Bang. So because the gravitational waves are like, they can't be stopped or they can't go away, so they're always there in the universe. And then if we are able to get a hand on the gravitational wave using the interferometers that we have seen before, we can also find out more details about the universe and how it began. So that is my part, guys, and thank you. 1 second, 1 second. Like, anybody has any questions or any part that you didn't understand? Yeah, like for 2 minutes, like 5 minutes, I'll take the time. I finished 5 minutes early also. Guys, any questions or any part that you didn't understand? You need more explanation on any specific part?
Yeah.
Yeah,
About with regards to the Michelson-Morley experiment,
yeah.
how did it exactly how did they exactly arrive at their conclusion though?
What conclusion? No, this is not the Michelson-Morley experiment. Like, I just gave an example of an interferometer that was like the basic idea that they thought in order to also detect the gravitational waves as such. It is not the Michelson-Morley experiment as you've seen. Like the first one I showed you was like, actually the Michelson-Morley, the scale was actually 11 centimeters or something or so. It was actually 11 centimeters. And then using these methods of Michelson-Morley, where they were actually able to make only the calculations for about 11 kilometers to detect either, that is. So this is
Ah,
a more widened, you could say, like the way more improvised version of Michelson. Like, it's not a Michelson-Morley interferometer as such, but then its concept is that. But then like the functionality and the principle behind it also is different. Like how you use the power recycling mirror and how you use those this thing the mirror, the other reflective mirror that we use there.
okay,
So
yeah,
that,
yeah. Thanks.
Any questions, guys?
Um, yeah, a small doubt.
Yes.
Thanks for the lecture, but in the interferometry diagram, uh, we send a single ray, right? Laser ray initially, and that gets reflected back and forth.
Yeah.
Like in the picture, we after the between the mirrors, we can see a broad line, right? Like initially, it's a single line, and
Yes,
and
yes, yes.
it
That is
gets
actually the
thickened. Like, what
reflect.
do you
It is
mean?
to show. It is to show that it is reflected so many
Okay,
times. Yeah, the intensity of
just
it
to
increases.
mean that it gets
Yeah, 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 yeah.
reflected, not to
Yeah, it
mean
has
it
been
gets
reflected
increased in
many couple of times.
intensity.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, we have 4 minutes, I think, and yeah. So, hello, Summer. No, he's unmuted, but I don't think he is there. So, Pugar, what did you think? Like, do you have any questions? Mm-hmm. Which? No, 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 no. It was just to detect either which they thought was existing. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to
Hey,
ask
am I
if anyone
audible?
has explanation.
I'm audible.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Do any of you have an idea how you solve Einstein's equations to arrive at any prediction of what a gravitational wave should look like?
Actually, this part I think is covered by Yuvraj right now. He's using those center tensor calculations based on Einstein's field equations. So I think you'll probably come across it when he talks about it. I just wanted to cover the basic idea behind gravitational waves and how did we use to detect it. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
So it's not a question. Just it would be great if you tell the people that whether the mathematical formalism which we have,
Yeah, that
like
is
take
covered by
for
Yuvraj.
example, no. For example, we as you talked about the resolving power and all.
Okay,
So
okay.
it would be great if you tell people that whether the resolving power mathematical formula will be same as what we used to derive for electromagnetic wave or
Yeah.
mechanical
That is the
wave.
same because we're
That
using
will,
the same set of reflective and refractive mirrors, no? Yeah.
yeah. So you should tell this.
Okay, okay.
That can be a bit confusing.
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
Even all the dynamical property, all the physical property, the formula
Hmm.
which we have will be same for the gravitational wave also. There need not to be any specific
No, no,
formula
no.
or
There is no
specific
like
things.
it is it's such it's just a basic interferometer that is used um unlike either it is used to measure the distortion in the space time. So everything else remains the same. Only that the way the interferometer is built to meet such expectation like the such calculations that is like less than the size of an atom. There are more like many devices to make it practically also possible in this for the same. So based on other than that, all the other calculations that we have for other basic interferometers also are the same. There's no different any basic difference in this specific interferometer. Okay, so I'll hand over to you. Like Yuvraj can take over right now. I guess. Yeah. Yeah. We can see.
Just give me. Okay, fine. It's fine. Okay. Thanks, Mukund. It was good talk. You gave a good platform so that I can go on further on the gravitational waves. And so yeah, hi everyone. I'm Yuraj, and I'm gonna talk about the implications of gravitational waves. So I'll give you an overview of what we're gonna see in this part of the talk. So this generally covers all the stuff that you see actually with talks related to gravitational waves, like there are certain iconic figures, structures, and all those things which are in part of the gravitational wave talk in general, like a cliche part. But still, what do they actually mean? Like, what do they actually have for us to be inferred is what we are going to see in this. The talk will be most in a kind of an illustrative one where I show you certain pictures and I start you explaining, like I'll try my level best, whatever I know. I'll give you the insights of what those things actually mean and why are they so important to understand the universe in whole. So the next slide, one. Uh, yeah, like I couldn't see the slide yet. Okay, just give me a minute. I'll be back. I think I'll reconnect one so that the problem doesn't persist further. Yeah. Am I audible? Okay, fine. So yeah. So first, let's start with the structure of the gravitational waves. By the structure, I don't mean the structure of the gravitational wave in the space-time fabric itself, but else the wave profile of the gravitational waves that we generally infer from the detectors like LIGO and all. So let's see what the structure is, and let's see what we can infer from those wave profiles actually. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the infamous structure of the gravitational waves that we generally infer from the detectors like LIGO. This is the detection of the gravitational wave, which was received to us at 14th September 2015. The infamous first gravitational wave that the LIGO has um, collected, and it presented it to us. So I just give you guys a minute so that you can just point out certain specific factors that are only exclusively seen in this gravitational wave. Like no other wave has a certain characteristics, but only these gravitational waves have those. Can you just point me out if you guys could try? You can turn on your mics and comment on it. Guys, anyone?
Yeah, one second.
Okay.
I didn't got your question. Can you please repeat?
Okay, the question was actually like, what are certain factors that are seen in gravitational wave, the wave profile, but is not seen in any other waves, like some certain key, like some new things that you generally see with the waves. Okay,
In the frequency of the.
I'm sorry, you're breaking.
I'm saying that change which the change in the frequency of it.
Uh,
For a particular waves, frequency is a character.
like your voice is breaking. I couldn't
Okay.
hear it properly. Okay, fine.
I will.
Okay, fine. Like in meanwhile, while Samath is typing over there, does anyone have any insight? Like, have you guys are familiar with the gravitational wave profiles in general? Like, you guys would have seen this, but still, okay, once, okay, fine. Let's skip this questionnaire and I'll start going on with it. In meanwhile, once Samat finishes his response, we'll start it. Yeah, okay. Samad got it right. There is this peculiar thing that you can see with the wave profile of the gravitational waves is that it starts as a normal wave, but once when it reaches the merger, like when two celestial bodies tend to combine together, collapse together, what happens is that you can see a profound differences in the in the wavelength and the frequency of the curve itself. So this is one thing that you can note. So let's now go on to find out what we can actually infer from it. Next slide, Tugal. The next slide. Okay. So what happens is that you know these curves over here, right? So as I have told you that it starts out to be a normal one, but as it further progresses towards the merger, the frequency and the wavelength changes, like it gets intensified, both gets moved and they merge, and finally the curve, the gravitational wave ceases finally. So what, like, can you guys find it weird to find both wavelength and the frequency increasing at the same time? Isn't that actually violate the wave nature of it? Because waves have an inverse property where if frequency increases, the wavelength decreases, and if wavelength increases, the frequency decreases. But here, it goes on increasing. So what happens is that this waveform actually gives one of the key information that Einstein has passed one of the most basic tests of physics, which is the radiation reaction problem, aka also called as the Grim Reaper of atomic Bohr's atomic model. So what happens here is that when an object revolves around another one, the object which is revolving tends to lose energy. So when it the wavelength tends to increase because the amplitude increases, right? Pugal, have you got it?
Actually, if the amplitude increases, we can't just say the wavelength should increase, right?
Okay, so here you can consider this wave, the wavelength. Okay, fine. But what happens is that the intensity gets increased and the wavelength actually tends to maybe fine. Maybe I can be wrong in that part. Okay, fine. The amplitude tends to increase. Okay, fine. I got it mixed up with the wavelength. Fine, got it. Fine.
Yeah, fine.
Okay, okay,
No
fine.
problem.
Okay, fine. Okay. But one thing is that it does pass the radiation reaction problem because when things like when they come together, they tend to lose energy. The celestial bodies, the which are going to merge together, when they come together, they need to lose energy, and this energy like can't go out of nowhere, like it can't disappear out of nowhere. It has to be presented in some other way, and it is actually presented in the way in the form of gravitational waves. The energy which is lost by the binaries due to their rotation tends to be transferred to the gravitational waves, and due to that their frequency, which is an measure of the amount of energy that the wave possesses, so it goes on increasing. So that is one thing that actually that can be inferred from it. So when you see from the waveform, you can predict certain areas like where the in spiral starts, then where at which point the merger happens, then finally we can find out regarding the energy part. Okay, fine. So the energy is actually like since frequency is actually gives frequency is proportional to the energy that the wave holds. As the frequency increases, so the energy increases. So this increase in energy comes from the fact that the energy lost by the binaries when they come close together by the radiation of the energy, so that complements the energy that is being added to the gravitational waves. So yeah, so that is the thing. And Einstein's general relativity has exactly predicted it in a fashion that it exactly predicts the wave profile of the gravitational wave should be in such a case. So yeah, the next slide, Pavel. Okay, fine. This is an GSI which I included, but this is not running. Fine. Okay. The next slide. If you ask me that if LIGO was the first system or the first set of experiments that actually helped to prove the gravitational waves, then I would say that it was not the fact, because even before LIGO was in its toddler steps, when it was initiated, like people were having ideas about starting an detector like LIGO, there was these people, Hulse and Taylor, who actually found out an solid evidence to prove that general relativity was right and the presence of gravitational wave was indeed true. So what here the image here is that the ratio between the cumulative time that the stars spend while being close together. So this periastron time is the time taken by the star to actually remain in a region where both these binaries are at the maximum possible closest distance. This is also called as perigee in case of planets, since its star astro, it's periastron, and as they tend to revolve around each other due to the radiation of energy, they tend to come close together. So when they come close together, what happens is that the time spent in the periastron actually increases, and this is what is being predicted by general relativity. And luckily, all the data which they collected aligned exactly with the predictions that general relativity made. Those points over there represent the time taken for a body to remain in its periastron. So this periastron time, you can see it tends to increase from 5, 10, 15 and so on. So yeah, so this is something like the time reduces, the time increases that they spend. So this actually gives you an evidence that the general relativity was indeed true in finding out this. Okay, so the next slide, please. So far we have seen everything to be smooth, like the waveforms are actually predicted to be smooth waveforms, where at the time of merger, due to the radiation reaction, the energy tends to be transferred to the gravitational waves and the frequency tends to increase. But in reality, things are not actually smooth, and therefore the curve is also not that smooth. Like those curves tend to have certain disturbances. Like those are not as predicted from the relativity. There are many factors that actually causes it, and along with these, there is also one more thing. The next slide, Google. So the actual data that you receive from the output after all the after the LIGO starts detecting a gravitational waves, the laser starts to wobble a bit and they start producing signals, right? But in the actual output that the immediate output that you get is not the light blue curve that you get, which is the actual signal, but that signal is actually messed up, and it is mixed with all the stuffs like noise and other factors which are need to be cleaned up. So these two things actually don't like, without knowing how these gravitational waves are or how the noises are, we can't actually separate out the gravitational wave profile signal that we have received, and also the curves won't be that proper. Like the noises doesn't have an effect on the wave profile of the curve, but still they like they need to be filtered. Let's see what are the stuff that actually plays here, so that these noises first can be removed. Like regarding the wave profiles of the gravitational wave, we'll see. Next slide, Google. Uh, orbital period and the periastron time. Okay. So the orbital period is the time taken by the whole thing which is revolving around it. The time taken for it to complete one orbit is called as the orbital period. Whereas the periastron time is that the distance, like the time taken by a celestial body. Here in the case of stars, like if you consider a celestial orbit, it generally will be an eclipse, right? So it has 2 points, like perigee and apogee. Apogee is the point where the like if you consider in one of the focus, if a star is there, the thing which is closer to the focus, the extreme end which is closer to the focus, from where the other celestial body is there, so that is called as the perigee, and the other thing vice versa is called as the apogee. So now in its rotation, there it will spend a certain amount of time at the periastron, like it is very closer to the period where it is. So that goes on increasing, like the time that it spends there goes on increasing, because the periastron, it initially it starts to be like a kind of a point, and it when it closes together, then you have a certain region there, like it goes on further and further, like you have a certain region in the orbit itself where it is closer to the second celestial body. So in that way, the periastron time increases, and this happens due to the orbit, due to the shrinking of the orbit, and that is actually related to the emission. So that is the thing. So just to give you an insight on how actually those noises can be so problematic, here is an equation. So this is the Einstein's field equation, simplified simplified very like how to say, in a major way, so that you guys can have an insight on what they actually means. So the T over here is called as the stress energy tensor, that is actually caused by factors like celestial bodies due to the presence of energy in them, and whereas the C over there is the curvature in the space time that you can actually find over there, like due to the energy, the curvature of space time gets it curved, so that measure of the curvature is given by C. So you can consider that the T and the C are directly proportional, because the more the energy or a mass that a particle possesses or a celestial system possesses, the more the curvature is. So this can be actually equated with an constant, like similar to Hooke's law, where the amount of force that you put and the amount of displacement that it has a constant there. So this constant over there is here is K, and this K, if you solve all the Einstein's equation, like those T and C, which I call as tensors, are not so simple. They are so complicated. Like they have more than all variables that we generally would have ever imagined. Like it has more than 3 for sure, but it has more than that. So it is generally represented as like matrices and all. So leave it aside. This K over here is a constant, and that can be measured to be C to the power of 4, where 8 pi g, where g is the universal gravitational constant and C is the speed of light. And you can consider that how huge the value K would be, and this can you can theoretically call this to be the how to say, the rigidness of the universe, and this rigidness of the universe is the reason why your signals, the gravitational wave, is too small. But the other signals that you get with the detectors and other stuff are happening in a medium which they travel and whose rigidity is not that great. So what happens is that those noise can be so greater than the waveform that you expect from the celestial body, and therefore the signals get disappeared within the noises, and you need to clear them off, and finally take the details. So the next slide, please. Okay. So the next slide, we are going to see the setup of the gravitational normal gravitational director, like in the case of LIGO, and from there we can find out like how we are gonna, like, how to say, how we are gonna identify different types of noises which comes over there. Next slide, please. Okay. I apologize for the quality of the image, but it is the only image I was able to take for the lecture, and this was actually from the lecture of Mr. Suresh Doravi, who is one of the spokesperson at LIGO, and he recently gave a talk regarding it. And in that, you can you can find out different noises that actually emerges due to the detection. So the first thing is that is called as the photon shot noise. So this photon shot noise is nothing but the noise, the vibrations that we get due to the irregularity in the amount of photons that is being emitted in the lasers. So no matter how strong laser you use, quantum mechanically the amount of the quantization of photons which comes out, like which forms the laser over there, it starts deviating. Like for the amount of photons that you receive per minute goes on decreasing, and since it being in quantum mechanical stuff, you generally don't have an effect on it. So that is something called as the photon shot noise. And the second thing is that the thermal noises. So these thermal noises are nothing but the noises that you infer due to the lasers hitting the mirror. So when lasers hit the mirror, what happens is that the atoms in the surface, they start to vibrate due to the thermal energy that they gain, and these vibrations also contribute for the noise, which we generally don't need to study about the gravitational waves. And one more thing is that there are factors like seismic noises. So these seismic noises occur due to the tectonic activities or other earthly activities that we generally have around us. So these two have effect on it. And even factors like these, unless if the pathway through which the lasers go is vacuumed, there are certain conditions where these molecules, the molecules which is present inside the pathway through which the laser goes, they too interact and they too give out certain noises and these things. But LIGO, the advanced LIGO didn't have these things, but the advanced LIGO have all these factors. Like they have cooling systems to reduce the thermal noise, to ensure that the mirror doesn't give out a lot of thermal energy. And we have factors like laser cleansifiers, where they actually compute, like if you can see in the left hand side, they computerize all those laser stuff. They recycle these lasers signals and all, so ensure that they maximum reduce the photon noise. But like even factors like these seismic noises can also be reduced by like having some, how to say, mounts through which doesn't give a lot of noises. The problem is that no matter whatever you try, the photon shot noise is quantum mechanical and you can't change anything regarding it. So that is one thing that is there. But apart from there are certain problems like noises that happens beyond our limits. Like we can't control them. So let's see what are those things. The next slide. Okay, so the stuff, what happens is that there are constant bombardments of other radiations and factors like from the celestial, from the sky, around, from the cosmic backgrounds. So these things also sometimes like they don't have that much effect, but still they do affect a lot on the actual signal that we infer. And along with that, we also have one more thing, which is due to the nature of the source through which we gain this gravitational wave. So first, let's identify how we can overcome the other celestial noises or the unwanted signals that we get from the cosmic background. So the next slide. Okay, so here machine learning comes to rescue. Machine learning, as you all generally know, is the predictive modeling that we can that a computer can make by having the previous data that we have collected here. Here, what happens is that apart from the gravitational wave signal, the actual gravitational wave signal that we receive from the source, we tend to switch on this what is it? The detector 24/7, and what we measure is that the constant deviations or noises that we hear with the lasers in the detector, and we start making a databases on it. And from that, we tend to have a certain system where when we give the supercomputers to actually find, like supercomputers or advanced systems to find out what is actually the required signal that we have received in the ocean of noises that we have, these data sets that we have feeded onto this computer will ensure that it removes those noise signals also. So from there, we won't be manipulated by the amount of other radiations or the other noises that we receive from the cosmic background. So that is how machine learning actually helps there. And the next slide, please. So this is something so weird for me when I was introduced to this first time. What happens is that unlike the smooth gravitational the wave profile that you have received while predicting with normal relativity, general relativity, there are certain gravitational waves which has certain timbers. What happens is that the amount of wave nature, like the thing I told you, right, when it is going near to merger, what happens is that the frequency of the wave increases. So when this thing happens, this thing actually happens, but the problem is that it won't happen as a smooth curve, whereas it has certain modifications. Like you can see between the merger, the curves are not smooth, but it has certain advanced multiple nodes. So these are in general called as timber. So this timber actually works even with the finding the sources of the gravitational fields too. So even these timbers, like how we can distinctively find out the tune that we get from a piano and the tune that we get from a guitar, even these things help us to find out what was the source and how was the source. Like initially it might be seen to be a problem to you, like these timbers giving you a non-linear curve, like a non-generalized curve in general. But what happens is that by studying these further, like you can split them using Fourier series, the basic Fourier series and Fourier transform that we study in our college. By splitting them apart, you can you can study about multiple poles of the gravitational wave. Like these gravitational waves are generally quadrupole in nature, but these timbers are actually caused by higher degree poles, which are formed due to the mergers. So like there are stuff like octopole waves and all. So these gets merged with the gravitational waves, and by splitting them apart, you further have a greater insights on the source from which these gravitational waves merge. And so yeah, the next slide. So that is what with Fourier series, those things can be an vital component rather than it being a hurdle. So the next slide. Okay, fine. So we have found a way to actually we have found solutions to the problems that have arisen. But one more thing is that how do we actually like computers doesn't generally go on predict itself. We need to give it certain wave natures or certain basic profiles, standard profiles that it needs to analyze and goes on start predicting it. So similarly, if a wave, gravitational wave is surrounded by noise, how can it actually differentiate the noise from the actual signal? So one thing here is that we have three different methods to actually predict the wave nature, given that all kinds of possibilities that we have. So the first things that we have is that post-Newtonian method. So these post-Newtonian methods generally like when the binary systems which are kind of divided apart, they generally follow the Newtonian principles and ideas to have to undergo the revolutions and all those things. But when they start coming closer to the numeric like when they start coming closer to the merger, what happens is that they start to have some deviations which normal Newtonian mechanics can predict, similar to the periastron differences in the Mercury, which was not able to be predicted by Newtonian principles, whereas Einstein's general relativity was able to do. Then there we start to use numerical relativities, where we use the equations, the Einstein's general relativity, the field equations, and all, to predict how the nature of the gravitational waves will be and all those things. And finally, once these mergers happen, what happens is that they once this thing becomes a whole compact system, they have certain perturbations, like they go on have some vibrations, changes, and all, and they come finally to a steady state, a curved black hole, where the gravitational waves won't be generated further. So this after this merger, until it turns to be a stable one, you can't generally predict it manually. Like those things, you can predict it, but those things are very complicated because the black holes being the most chaotic systems the whole universe has ever known, because the probability of finding it actually has a formula 1 minus e to the power of 2 pi t, where t is the current temperature of the system. Here it's the black hole. So this 2 pi t is the maximum chaotic value, which is chaos is proportional to the temperature. So those 2 pi t is the maximum chaotic value that a particular system can have. And since the black hole, it being the most chaotic system the nature can allow, you need supercomputers to actually you need to run those signals to actually come to a conclusion how it wobbles and finally comes back to the normal position. So the next slide. Okay, fine. So these are the stuffs that I have mentioned in the previous slide. So yeah, the next slide. Okay, fine. Again, this thing. This is the image that I have shown you some long time back. So you can see that this red curve, right? It also has this black curve. So these curves are actually like to help you to understand how accurate these numerical relativities can be. Like if after all these tests and all those stuff, rather than these platforms being a chance to test Einstein's general relativity, we started using Einstein's general relativity to actually verify our results. So that's how great general relativity has been devised. And so yeah, so that's the thing. The next slide, please. The next slide. Okay. Okay. So again, as I have told you, right? So how things like keyboard and guitars sound can be differentiated due to the timber they possess. Apart from the timbers that I have shown you previously, the waveform also, the wave profile also helps you to differentiate or to identify the different sources that actually gives out these gravitational waves. The next slide we are going to see how different stuffs work. So the next slide, please. Okay, so these are the different gravitational wave profiles that we have received so far. The one on top, which is the GW 1509 Foton, is the gravitational wave that we have received on 14th September 2015. So like one additional information, like how do you generally read these gravitational waves is that the last two numbers at the last gives you the date of the month, the middle two numbers gives you the month, and the first two numbers gives you the year. So it goes in the reverse. And also the one more thing that I would like to show here is that the gravitational wave at the last, right, the GW 170817. So that was the most recent gravitational wave that was actually published. And one more thing is that this wave is kind of unique. Why is it this? Because this is the first gravitational wave that we have received from a neutron star binary. So all the gravitational waves that we have received so far involves a black hole. So by the first gravitational wave that we have received from a neutron star merger is the gravitational waves that we have used here. So you can find out that each wave has its own the wave profile where the amplitude and again the frequency changes. Even there is a change in the wavelength. And all those by all those factors, you can actually predict the mass of the substance, and from that you can predict what kind of substance is actually causing it. There can be certain anomalies, but so far we haven't noticed any anomalies where the predicted stuff, it like what we have predicted it to be a black hole turns up to be a neutron star. So such anomaly haven't occurred already, but there is an good chunk of probability that might also happen. So yeah. So the next slide, please. Okay. Since you have seen that apart from the binary, you can see that even binary systems have different waveforms. Even there are certain systems which can also produce gravitational waves, like things like short gamma ray bursts that we get from the center of the galaxies and all, or things like supernova where a star reaches its final stage and it starts when it explodes, right, shedding off its outer layer, that it being further into a white dwarf, neutron star, or black hole and all. So these supernova or even kilonova is the phenomenon where a neutron star being unstable, it explodes to give off the heavy elements. So even kilonovas, those kind of events can also give you a gravitational wave. But compared to the gravitational wave that we receive from a black hole merger or neutron star merger, the amplitude or the energy of the gravitational wave is so small that we can't actually measure it using the current physical constraints that we have. There are also even gravitational waves whose frequencies don't stay for hours or seconds or minutes, but it extends for millions of years. So when a gravitational wave of such long period takes place, like whose frequencies is of years or millions of years, what happens is that it may be marked by all the other noises that we get. So we don't have the like we can't generally measure all those things. So such thing is called as the stochastic gravitational waves that we get from the inflationary epoch. The inflationary epoch is the immediate period right after the period where our universe seems to be starting from a single point, like an explosion, like Big Bang. So these, since all these things have a common factor that they were accelerating or they were decelerating for a short period of time. So these acceleration or deceleration of this stuff can produce gravitational waves, and we need some different methods to actually read, to actually understand how these things work. So the next slide. Okay, so the other ways to actually measure gravitational waves is giant meter wave radio telescopes, or using giant meter wave radio telescopes, or using pulsar timing arrays. So this giant meter wave radio telescope, what it does is it's simple. It collects the radio signals from the from an celestial system or whatever it is. But what happens is that the radio wave sources that we get from a fixed points, like if you can consider to be a particular point, right? Like if you consider a particular SAR system to give you a certain radio signals constantly, a constant radio signal. So you can use these radio signals to actually detect a gravitational wave. What happens is that if a gravitational wave comes across this channel through which the radiation, through which the radio waves are being read or calculated here, when this gravitational waves passes, what happens is that you get a deviation in the signal that you get. When these signals have a deviation, then it shows that the gravitational waves can actually be from might have passed this channel. This also has a problem where certain other particles can also particles crossing this channel can also mimic certain kinds of deviation in the radio signals, but it is again one of the most reliable sources that you can use to find out gravitational waves of such long frequencies. And it is generally said that LIGO people were actually lucky before people from giant meter wave radio telescope system haven't found out a gravitational wave before them. So such how effective these radio telescope measurements are actually is. And one more thing is that the pulsar timing array. So as you know, these pulsars have precision in the amount of radiations that they release, so that they can be used as celestial clocks and all. So while calculating these radiations, which again come back to you as timers, so you can find out, if you find out certain anomalies again in this, you can conclude that there was a gravitational wave which would have passed over there. So these are certain other ways that, apart from interferometry of LIGO, that you can find out, apart from LISA, which is also planned to be launched at 2030, I guess. So yeah, the next slide. Okay, so that ends my talk. Hope you guys had some quality time over here. And if there are any questions, please free to ask those. Thank you.